Entropy loss syndrome is a terminal illness that plagues the survivors of the Glamoth Iron Cavalry. Created as a means to fight the swarm disaster, these mass-produced warriors of the Iron Cavalry take the power of propagation and use it against the swarm, but at a massive cost. That cost being their lives, making characters like our beloved companion Firefly to be a ticking time bomb. And as of right now, things aren't looking exactly good for her. But what if I told you that this is very much curable and there are in fact 3 different ways for her to be saved, with 2 being dangerous and unlikely, but most likely painless, or at least one of them is, and the last one being excruciatingly painful and also the most plausible. And while Jade required a price for this info, I'm giving it away for free. Because as we've journeyed throughout the stars, we've come in contact with many different paths as well as aeons. So dealing with an artificial terminal illness such as entropy loss is no easy task, but in this video I'm going to prove that it is very much possible to cure. So without further ado, this is Firefly's cure to entropy loss syndrome revealed. Okay, so before we cut to the chase, Discord, join it, 2K milestone, almost there, big event, lots of fun, you know the deal. We gotta understand what exactly entropy loss syndrome is, which is already complicated to start with because there are 2 explanations for where this comes from: Firefly and Jade. And even though I can't stand Jade, Firefly's explanation is from the 3.8 fever dream, and she says things like this.
If there's even the slightest chance that Acheron might draw her blade, I cannot let her be there.
I'm never letting her live that down. So yeah, but anyway, the way Jade explains entropy loss is that it is a failsafe implemented by the higher-ups of Glamoth because they feared the massive fighting force they themselves created. And this is corroborated by the story of the Iron Cavalry, suggesting that the people feared this massive army of mech fighters that were being controlled by a single telepathic overlord named Titania. So it would make sense that they would make them short-lived as a safety precaution. Inhumane, but it lines up. And the second way we can explain this is that Firefly says that they draw their power from the propagation. So they, just like the bugs, have a swarm mother, and when that swarm mother dies, they kinda die too. So when Titania died, the Iron Cavalry isn't supposed to last much longer after that. Personally, I think this would suggest some type of hive mind, which the cavalry fighters don't seem to have. So their entropy loss is either a side effect of their power or was implemented into them by the higher-ups. So I'm just gonna combine the 2 just to be safe. The higher-ups intentionally made their power their weakness. They could have created a propagation-powered army of mech fighters without the drawback, but gave them this weakness of relying on a swarm mother on purpose to pretty much control their lifespan. Why? Well, they weren't exactly seen as human. They were mass-produced weapons. Big scary mech outnumbered the people of Glamoth, you get the idea. Also, apparently there was a cure for this for some reason, but ever since Glamoth fell, it's been forgotten. But how does this affliction work? Well, it sucks, because entropy loss syndrome is a condition that refers to an irreversible chronic dissociation of a person's physical structure. Put simply, their bodies fall apart. And when you look into it from a scientific point of view, this condition refers to the fight against the concept of entropy that everything in existence is currently engaged in. Entropy being the underlying natural order of chaos every atom, molecule, and particle wants to return to. And when something loses to entropy, it's like you take a stack of papers and then throw them into the air. They scatter all over the place as entropy wins. But if something isn't sudden like this, then it takes the form of things like age, a slow war of attrition that entropy always wins, because when a person dies, they decay and return to dust, the natural chaotic state. So this is what will happen to Firefly if she succumbs to entropy loss. It's not that she loses entropy, it's that her body loses to entropy at an accelerated rate. Alright, so now that we understand what entropy loss syndrome is and what this means for Firefly, how do we cure it? Well, let's start with the least 2 painful methods. The first one being the Remembrance. If we can somehow turn Firefly into a mimetic entity, she can survive without the need of a physical body. And there are 2 ways to do this. Firefly can align her will to that of Fu Li's and reject her physical body and turn into a memo keeper akin to Black Swan and Dahlia. But speaking of Dahlia, we know that she has marks of golden blood on her that, according to Ron May and Ting Yoon, should be causing her agonizing pain, but since she is a mimetic entity, she doesn't have to feel pain if she doesn't want to. And she can take whatever form she pleases at any given moment. Dharmakayas are just that flexible. Also, this explains why characters like Dahlia, Black Swan, and Cyrene are as shapely as they are. They do that on purpose. Nova, is there a lore reason why these memory ladies got all that? Yes. Yes, there is.
Of course you do. Cheerful, beautiful, optimistic. Just how I imagined I'd look as a grown-up.
But anyway, entropy loss syndrome only affects a person's physical structure, not their memory, so if she can exist as a memo keeper, she's all good. And in that way, becoming a memo keeper is the easiest and comfiest way for Firefly to survive. But I hope you're ready for things to get dark, because it's only downhill from here. The next way is for Firefly to have her memories siphoned out and turned into a memory bubble and then stored in Penacony, which we know is possible because that is how the IPC kept Chadwick alive to further interrogate him. And if you want to know more about that, video right there. But that way, we would have to pull her memories as she dies, and she wouldn't be able to leave Penacony afterwards. So that sucks. But she lives, and those are the only two ways I can see the Remembrance being the cure. And unfortunately, it only gets more painful from here because the next way to save her comes from the Abundance. And this could be as easy as somehow getting fruit from the Ambrosial Arbor, or even worlds like Verdantia or Ron May's homeworld and eating it, and then becoming a long-life species, or she would need to do something like what happened to Blade and fuse herself using Shuhu's flesh. That still exists, by the way. The Shanzhou people say they killed Shuhu, but of course, they can't kill it. It's an abundance emanator, so they sealed it in a secret place in the shackling prison somewhere. Now, if the Stellaron Hunters were to steal that, then she could live, and if they can't do either of those, she could always just pray to Yaoshu and then get blessed, because Yaoshu is famous for granting wishes to literally anyone asking. But Nova, what is so painful about that? The Abundance kinda just heals you and you're good, right? No, it's not that simple. Nothing in this game is that simple. Because the way the Abundance works is that you consistently heal, but you still feel pain. Like every time Blade dies, it hurts. When he heals, it hurts. When he dies, it hurts. He dies every time he is mortally wounded. Then he is brought back to life. Also, the Abundance doesn't make your problems just go away. Your body will still break down. So if Firefly were to be blessed by the Abundance, she would live in a constant death and rebirth cycle. Her body would fall apart, she would come back to life, and then die over and over and over again. How fast this would happen, I don't know, but her body would be constantly rejecting life, and Abundance would be endlessly imposing life on her body, leading to a more tortured existence than Blade lives currently. Not to mention the side effects that naturally occur in Yaoshu blessed species living too long, like the Mara. And becoming something like Blade would probably be the best case scenario for her, because if not, she would become Mara struck after a while and then die that way. So she could live longer, but her life would suck. So yeah, this is an option, but death might be better than living in this state. So this leaves us only one last method of curing Firefly with our current knowledge. And this is the best and surefire way to cure her, along with how I think this will happen in the story in the future. However, this is also the most agonizingly painful cure, and you are not going to like it. Ready? Okay, in order to cure Firefly, and how I personally think this is going to happen, is that Firefly must become a Lord Ravager. Yes, the best and most perfect way to cure Firefly is through Nanook. Death must beget life. And hear me out, Nanook is the avatar of Entropy. Of course they can cure Entropy Loss Syndrome. They control the very concept of chaos. And we have proof of this as well, because in the database it says that Nanook throws their Lord Ravagers into the Warforge, or the Furnace of War's world, where they are reforged and their deficiencies are mended with antimatter. And there is no greater deficiency than a terminal illness artificially implanted into your DNA. So this is something that Nanook would mend assuredly. We also know that even after death, Nanook can just bring things back to life, because with Selenova, she died as a Harmony Emanator and then was reborn as a Lord Ravager. Nanook's control over Entropy allows them to heal and harm Entropy and neg Entropy. But there's a catch. This process involves, and I quote, inversion from the inside out, making this the most utterly excruciating way to cure Firefly, but also the most final and the one that allows her to maintain a physical form. She even has a path to target, as all Lord Ravagers do, the propagation. And you know how all of Nanook's emanators all come from the path they target? Selenova came from Harmony, Iron Tomb was a part of Noose, Zephyro is rumored to be a self-annihilator, Fantilia is from the Shenjo, heck, even Luxbane is something like a Leviathan that wants to kill the permanence and or the veracity. And we already know that Ouroboros is something like a Leviathan, and Leviathans are not always giant water creatures either. Sometimes they are historically referred to as dragons. So we don't exactly know yet. Point is, Firefly meets every criteria for her to become a Lord Ravager. And maybe, just maybe, this is why Elio's script is pushing her towards embracing death. Because it is through this death that she will find life. The further she runs down the path of destruction, the closer she is to finding her cure. And one more thing. Ever since it was said that Dahlia became a Lord Ravager named Ephemera in a different timeline, this stuck with me. Because this means at some point the Stellar Run Hunters will be in a position where they attract the gaze of Nanook. And if Dahlia isn't there, what happens? Who does Nanook look at? If Dahlia isn't there to steal the moment, is it Firefly who gets the spotlight? I think so, because Elio has made his promise and we already know how the finality works. So I think this promise can and will be kept as long as the script is followed. There are many ways to save Firefly, but the best option requires what Firefly was taught in Penacony. She must embrace death to gain the life that she so desperately desires. Remembrance and abundance are options, but they both result in the loss of something. But destruction is a net positive. She gets to keep her physical body and never has to worry about dying on repeat. Nanook doesn't even take their Emanator's free will either. They still get to do exactly what they want to do. And we don't have to worry about Firefly becoming an enemy because she only hates bugs.
Also, you can actually just go around them. No one said you have to pay attention to the bugs. That's your bad habit.
Sorry. I just can't bring myself to look the other way.
If it makes you feel better, I'll leave it to you. Just be quick about it.
Thank you.
She would just have more power to do what she's already instinctually influenced to do. The universe is a better place with a Lord Ravager around that wants the propagation gone. But Nova, wouldn't that contribute to the universe living instead of dying? Well, Nanook doesn't really care about that. If they did, they wouldn't have a Lord Ravager that is after the Nihility and the Harmony now, would they? That's two paths that will push the universe to finality. And the third one, well, we just gotta wait for Caslana to ascend. The jury's still out on that. But Nanook clearly doesn't care about eliminating paths that will aid in their end goal. They just are at war with every other Aeon and want every path gone. Something Firefly is more than happy to do with propagation. So yes, all the pieces are in place for Firefly to find her cure for Entropy Loss Syndrome in the Destruction. Because this is Firefly's cure to Entropy Loss Syndrome revealed. I'm not gonna lie, this has to be one of my favorite theories of all time. I touched on this in the Nanook video, but no, I had to dedicate an entire video to this. A bit late, but we're still in 3.8. Everyone's still worried about Firefly and if she will ever be happy. But in Hoyo fashion, things will always get worse before they get better. But the happy ending will be happy with a little bit of bittersweet in there. That is how Hoyo always likes to write things. And if we learned anything from Amphorius, things got worse before they got better, then we got around to a happy but bittersweet ending with hope for the future. That is also essential. That essential glimmer of hope for the future. And to properly predict things in writing, you always gotta study the author. But what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.